picture. There is also mild anemia as well as thrombocytosis in children with CML. So when we go for a bone marrow, so bone marrow is always hypercellular with cellularity of more than 25 to 30%, and the presence of mature granulocytes, eosinophils, basophil with granulocytic hyperplasia usually gives the diagnosis. Myelofibrosis occurs during the course of this illness in 35 to 40% of the patient, with ultimately leading on to the decrease in the total cell counts, or the patient may progress into the accelerated phase or in the blast phase. Coming on to the cytogenetics, as we have seen, Philadelphia chromosome is positive in almost all of these patients, with more than 95% positivity for translocation between chromosome number 9 to chromosome number 22, and this could be a simple translocation or there could be a complex type of translocation. And this documentation of ABL BCR translocation, this means this chromosome number 9 to 22 translocation, this is documented either by using southern blot or PCR assays, which can give you either a quantitative or qualitative assay also. And this is must for the diagnosis of CML for patients of chronic myeloid leukemia. Then, once the diagnosis is made and the child is followed, it either progresses to accelerated phase or the plastic crisis, or it may ultimately lead on to the myelofibrosis in children. So the usual course of chronic phase is around 3 to 4 years. After that, there is the onset of accelerated or blast crisis. So in blast crisis, the children they will present to you with acute fulminant leukemia-like presentation with history of fever, weight loss, or bleeding tendencies, or anemia as such. Specific conditions like hyperuricemia and neurological symptoms may also be there in the patient with chronic myeloid leukemia due to the increased blood viscosity because of the hyperleukocytosis. Increased number of blasts in the peripheral blood film and in the marrow also suggest you that there is a blastic crisis. Coming on to the management of CML, so the aim of the CML management is usually to control the total blood counts, because here the counts are very high and it will lead on to the thrombotic complications. So for that, here the single agent chemotherapy is sufficient. So either busulfan or hydroxyurea are used as a single agent initially to control the TLC, and once initial counts are within the acceptable range or less than, so they can be shifted on to the specific agents like alpha interferon or imatinib mesylate. So imatinib has come up as a targeted therapy in the patients with CML, and the response to imatinib has been seen in almost 90 to 100% of the patients. And it takes around 6 to 8 weeks to see the hematological response. And for cytological response, we have to wait for around 3 to 4 months. Average survival of these patients is around 3 to 4 years, and high rate of complete hematological and cytological remission with imatinib has now changed the clinical outcome of the patients with CML, and now almost all of these patients are surviving. Previously, allogeneic stem cell transplantation was the only documented curative therapy in children, but now with the use of imatinib, this can be prevented in these children. Then coming on to the complications associated with CML, so one complication we have already discussed, that there is a hyperleukocytosis in almost all of these children, along with thrombocytosis leading on to the thrombotic complications such as priapism or CNS manifestations. CNS leukemia can also be the part of the presentation, and the patient can present to you with either stroke-like symptoms, or they can have cranial nerve involvements or with features of increased intracranial tension. So all these manifestations can be associated. Once the children are started on to anti-cancer therapy or simply hydroxyurea or imatinib mesylate, in the initial few days, there are high chances that the children may be suffering from a tumor lysis syndrome, in which there are metabolic complications along with um, renal failure, risk of renal failure. So that's why these children has to be monitored very stringently while we are starting with fluids or the therapy in initial few weeks of the therapy. Then coming on to the juvenile CML. So juvenile CML is also uncommon condition, accounting for only less than 2% of the childhood leukemias. Chronic panmyelopathy with high leukocyte count, along with splenomegaly and a low leukocyte alkaline phosphatase. So these are the features which gives you the diagnosis of JCML. According to the FAB classification, JCML is now grouped under a broad heading of myelodysplastic syndromes. The onset of JCML is in the infancy and in the early childhood. The children usually are of less than 5 years of the age, and most of the time the children are in the infantile period. The presentation is more acute, and the course is very severe in these children, with mortality in around 70 to 80% of the children without treatment. And the only curative treatment available for this condition is the hematopoietic stem cells transplantation. Frequent anemias, lymphadenopathy, hepatosplenomegaly, infections, and skin involvement. They are also these specific findings which are associated with this particular condition. In skin involvements, the findings could be either eczema, xanthomas, or cephalosporins. When we look for the peripheral blood film, leukocytosis often counts are not very markedly elevated. The counts are less than 1 lakh with full spectrum of granulocytic precursors and increased number of normoblasts in the previous picture. Monocytosis is very characteristic of this particular condition, and there could be associated anemia or thrombocytopenia due to replacement of the normal marrow fragments with the normal cells. The bone marrow is always hypercellular with predominance of all the cells of the granulocytic series in various stages of maturation. Megakaryocytes are either normal or decreased. There is no specific cytogenetic finding in this particular condition. Philadelphia chromosome, that is chromosome translocation of chromosome number 9 to 22 is negative in most of these children, and the specific cytogenetic abnormality observed in around 50% of the patient is the presence of monozonin 7. The course here is very fulminant and fatal in less than 1 year. No effective cure is available till date, and the only management which we can offer to the patients are the good supportive care involving the transfusion of blood products like red blood cells, platelet transfusions, and the treatment of infections using appropriate antibiotics. Chemotherapeutic agents available for the management of JCML are either the use of subcutaneous Ara-C or along with oral 6-mercaptopurine. The results of allogenic stem cells transplantation, they shows a event-free survival for only 30 to 50% at 3 years. So this means the transplant is also not very effective in this particular condition. Some agents like cis retinoic acid has been tried, which can prolong the remission, but still a cure is not available. So this is all regarding the chronic type of leukemias in the children. Now coming on to another important category of childhood malignancy, those are the lymphomas. So lymphomas, they are the third most common type of malignancies in childhood, accounting for 10 to 15% of all newly diagnosed cancer in this particular age group. The malignancy of lymphocytes origin, they can either be of B cell type or T cell origin. Over past several decades, the total incidence of these hematological malignancies has increased dramatically in both the sexes. There are two major categories. One is the Hodgkin's disease and another is the non-Hodgkin's type of lymphoma. They differ significantly in their clinical course, treatment strategy, as well as the therapeutic outcomes. So first we will discuss regarding the Hodgkin's lymphoma or Hodgkin's disease in particular. So it accounts for less than 5% of the cancer in children in less than 14 years of age, and about 15% of the children in children 15 to 19 years of the age. So this suggests that this is the particular disease which usually affects the adolescents, and it has a characteristic bimodal curve of age specific incidence rates. First peak is in the adolescent age, like 15 to 20 years, and second peak is in the late adulthood, that is 45 to 55 years of the age. In developing countries, early peak before adolescent has been observed. The incidence has remained relatively stable over a period of time in last few decades, with a slightly male predominance among young children, with the ratio of 4 is to 1 in children 3 to 7 years of the age, 3 is to 1 for children 7 to 9 years of the age, and 1.3 is to 1 in children more than 10 years of the age. Coming on to the etiologies and pathogenesis, so there has been seen that there is some kind of clustering of cases in some certain families, so which suggests that could be a underlying genetic basis of the susceptibility of Hodgkin's lymphoma. And once the workup has been done, the association with HLA-A1 has been documented. There are also reports which suggest that there is a role of EBV infections as a underlying precipitating factor for development of Hodgkin's disease. And other viruses like CMV and HHV6 has also been implicated as the etiological factors. Pre-existing immunodeficiencies like ataxia telangiectasia, viscotalgia syndrome, and acquired infections with HIV can also be taken as a predisposing factor for the development of Hodgkin's disease. So there is a possible model for the pathogenesis of Hodgkin's lymphoma, which suggests that the precursor cells or the stem cells present within the germinal center, uh, they get affected or infected by a transforming agents, specifically the viral infections like EBV, which further lead on to the malignant transformation of these cells into specific Hodgkin cells or ARS cells, which has an overexpression of the surface receptors like LMP1 overexpression, which make these cells lose their control over the apoptosis, and they can undergo or they will undergo auto proliferation along with the help of certain cytokines within the vicinity. So the inflammatory response and systemic signs symptoms are because of the release of these various cytokines within the pathogenesis or pathology of Hodgkin's lymphoma. So the RS cells or the germinal origin B cells and their mononuclear variants, they are the malignant cells in the Hodgkin's lymphoma, but they constitute only a minor component of the total tumor, and majority of the tumor mass has been being composed of the reactive inflammatory cells, which are of normal morphology. So these cells are the mixture of lymphocytes, plasma cells, eosinophils, and fibroblasts in different proportions depending upon the different histological type. So the RS cells or the Reed Sternberg cell, it is of clonal origin and it arises from activated germinal center B cells or rarely from the T cells. So the various variants of RS cells are also being seen in different types of Hodgkin's lymphoma. So these are the clinical or the microscopic pictures of the pathological cells which are being seen. So the classic RS cells is seen in the mixed cellular variety of Hodgkin's lymphoma, in which there is a uh, bi the cells which is having a bilobate nucleus, and it gives a picture like an oval's eye. Then in lacunar cells around the nucleus there is has been seen an empty space, which is commonly seen in the nodulus process variety. Then also there is a popcorn cell observed in the lymphocyte predominance type, in which the nucleus is having an irregular appearance. So coming on to the classification of Hodgkin's lymphoma, the new WHO revised European American classification of Hodgkin's lymphoma now categorized lymphoma into two major groups. One is the nodular lymphocytic predominant type of Hodgkin's lymphoma, and another is the classical Hodgkin's lymphoma. There are further four subtypes of the classical type of Hodgkin's lymphoma, in which most common one is the lymphocytic rich, followed by mixed cellularity and nodular sclerosis type, and the rarest one is of the lymphocytic depletion type. Coming on to the clinical presentation of Hodgkin's lymphoma, children with Hodgkin's lymphoma, they usually present to you with a lymph node mass, usually in the neck region, And the lymph node mass is a very slowly progressive swelling, usually occurring over periods of months to years, and the swelling is very painless, and that's why the patient they will not report to you until unless there is a complication or the swelling is massive. So the painless cervical or supraclavicular lymphadenopathy, usually unilateral, non-tender, firm, and rubbery progressive swelling. This is the typical presentation. Two-thirds of the children they might have a mediastinal involvement, which can present to you with the features of obstruction or severe vena cava syndrome, causing the non-productive cough with sign symptoms of airway obstruction like dyspnea or hypoxia, as we have seen in children with T cell type of acute lymphoblastic leukemia also. Then axillary or inguinal lymphadenopathy or generalized lymphadenopathy, they can also be there as a first presenting symptoms, but the incidence is very low. Subdiaphragmatic site as a primary site of the disease is rare and it occurs in less than 5% of the children. Then coming on to the disease spread. So the usual tendency of the disease is to spread in the adjacent lymph node groups in early stages of development. Systemic organs like liver, spleen, bone marrow, and brain can be involved in the later stages. So patient can present to you as a pleural or pericardial effusion from the reactive lymphadenopathies. Then there could be hepatocellular dysfunction, marrow infiltration causing anemia, neutropenia, or thrombocytopenia. This can also be the presenting manifestation. Non-specific systemic symptoms like fatigue, anorexia, and weight loss. This is seen in children with um, beat type of disease. So these symptoms are noticed in less than 50% of the children, which is labeled as a B symptoms, like patient with unexplained fever of more than 39 degrees Celsius, unexplained weight loss of more than 10% of the total body weight over last 3 months, and patients with history of drenching night sweats. So these are the three symptoms which are taken as a B symptoms, and once the child is having these type of symptoms, the prognosis and the response to the therapy in these children is slightly poor as compared to the children without these symptoms. Less common symptoms with no prognostic significance are pruritus, which is more frequent in advanced stage disease and in women. Pain that worsen on alcohol ingestion, this can also be a non-specific symptom. Then there are certain immunological abnormalities observed in these children with Hodgkin's type of lymphoma. These abnormalities are allergy to delayed type of hypersensitivity, then abnormal cellular immune response, and slightly decreased CD4 to CD8 count. They show reduced natural killer cell cytotoxicity and impaired immunity. And these immunological abnormalities, these might persist even after treatment of the children with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Then once we have suspected that the child might have lymphoid malignancy, so a good history along with physical examination is important to label the staging. Then a CBC along with peripheral blood film to document any abnormal cells in the peripheral blood films. Then biochemistry, including renal function test and liver function test with serum electrolytes, serum LDH, calcium phosphates. These are important. And CT chest and CT neck as well as CT abdomen to look for the involvement of various lymph node groups and to stage the disease according to the Ann Arbor classification. Ultrasonography of CT abdomen can be used as the primary modality. And adequate surgical biopsy, especially the patients having massive lymph nodes, the excisional biopsy is the preferred investigation for looking into the microscopic as well as the histochemical architecture of these lymph nodes. Bone marrow aspiration and biopsy with advanced stage disease like stage 3 or 4 and the patients who are having B type of symptoms also. ESR and ferritin are having a prognostic significance and they can be used as a prognostic markers while the patient is on treatment to look for any relapse. Then FDG PET scan, this is now a recent investigation which can avoid the radiation exposure to the children to look for the status of the disease who are refractory or having a relapsed. disease. Staging laparotomy with the availability of good imaging of the abdomen. Now the uh, laparotomy at offset or at the time of diagnosis is now not recommended. Modified and nervous staging classification. So this is the clinical picture which shows that how the various lymph node groups are involved and how the staging has been done. So in stage 1, a single lymph node region or a single extralymphatic site is involved on one side of the diaphragm only. The patient is said to have a stage 2 disease when two or more sites on same side of diaphragm or contagious extralymphatic site is involved. Then, if both sides of diaphragms are involved, along with spleen or any other extralymphatic site, then the disease has been labeled as a stage 3 disease. And if there is a nodal disease along with diffuse involvement or the marrow involvement, then we have to label this patient as a stage 4 disease. Further, stage A or B has been added to the diagnosis once there is a presence of B symptoms in the children. So A has been given, the label A has been given if there are no systemic symptoms. B is put once there is a history of fever, night sweat, or weight loss of more than 10% of the body weight in the previous 6 months. X has been given if there is a bulky disease with a greater diameter of 10 centimeter in the maximum dimension, or if there is involvement of more than one third of the internal transverse diameter of the thorax at the level of T5 to T6. Then E is the limited involvement of a single extranodal site. Then CS is the clinical stage when based solely on the physical examination and imaging finding. PS is the pathological stage based on the biopsies. So coming on to the management of these patients. So earlier radiotherapy was used very frequently in these children, but nowadays because of the risk involved in the long-term side effects of this radiotherapy, now combined multi-agent chemotherapy with or without low dose involved field radiotherapy has been the treatment of choice. So treatment largely based on the disease stage, age, and the time of diagnosis, presence or absence of the B symptoms, or presence of the bulky or the Highland staging. With current chemotherapy protocols, now the prognosis is very good in this patient with more than 80% survival after 5 years after getting 4 to 6 cycles of this ABVD. So the chemotherapy commonly used for patients in stage 1 or stage 2A without any favorable prognostic factor. These children, they get a 4 to 6 cycles of a combined chemotherapy regime involving adriamycin, bleomycin, vinblastine, and dacarbazine. This might be followed by a low dose of involved field radiation, and this patients with stage 3B or stage 4 disease, they have to undergo radiotherapy cycles also after the course of 6 course of ABVD or COP. Then for bulky diseases, radiotherapy is usually given at the site of bulky disease in addition to the standard treatment recommended for a particular stage. So these are the various drugs and how they are given. So each cycle composed of total interval of 28 days with two phases. One phase is given at day 1 and another is at the time, day 15. And both these cycles, they make one individual cycle. Then various other chemotherapy regimes are also being practiced at various centers. So the commonly used ones are the COP or MOP or a BCOP also, which is an accelerated form of COP. Then the drugs which are commonly effective in patients with Hodgkin's disease are vincristine, procarbazine, prednisolone, cyclophosphamide, doxorubicin, etoposide, and bleomycin. Coming on to the prognosis, as we have already seen that the event-free survival is around 85 to 90% with an overall survival of more than 95% in patients even with stage 3 or 4 disease by using these combined chemotherapy regimes. Larger tumor bulk higher stage at the time of diagnosis and presence of B symptoms are the poor prognostic factors, in which the prognosis might be around 70 to 80%. So I think this is all which we can cover in a patient with the Hodgkin's lymphoma. So further, we can also see something or discuss something regarding the non-Hodgkin's type of lymphoma. So both these conditions are entirely different, though the clinical presentation seems similar. So in non-Hodgkin's type of lymphoma, here there is a malignant proliferation of the lymphocytic or the histiocytic lineage cells, and it composed of around 8 to 10% of the total malignancies in children between 5 to 17 years of the age, and accounts for around 60% of all lymphomas. So incidence of these non-Hodgkin's type of lymphomas are now progressively increasing over last few decades, with approximately around 250 patients being diagnosed annually. And there is also a marked male preponderance in the incidence. Most frequent malignancy, which is seen in children who are having a secondary immunodeficiency, especially the AIDS. And also there is a striking geographical difference in the incidence rates and the distribution of various subtypes, as well as the treatment outcome. Burkitt's lymphoma accounts for around 50% of the childhood tumor in the equatorial Africa. Coming on to the predisposing factors, as we have seen in rest of the malignancies, here also it's mostly a de novo disease. Underlying immunodeficiency might increase the risk of development of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma also, with around 10 to 10,000 times more risk as compared to the age-matched children. Then viral etiologies like EBV, HIV, genetic syndromes, telangiectasias, and patients undergoing immunosuppressive therapy, they are at the higher risk for development of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma also. So these non-Hodgkin lymphoma in children, they are very high-grade tumors with an aggressive clinical behavior as compared to the adult type of non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and they are mostly of either B cell type or T cell type. Non-Hodgkin lymphomas with genetic aberrations that influence proliferation, differentiation, and apoptosis. These are very commonly seen in children, and the common genetic abnormality observed in Burkitt's type of lymphoma is a translocation 814, or less commonly a translocation of 2 to 8 or translocation 822. So these could be observed. So this is the histopathological and biological features of various type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in children. Almost any of these cells, like B cell or T cell or iso the natural killer or null cells, they can be the primary cell of involved origin of these malignancies. Most common type of lymphoma observed in Southern Asian settings are of the small non-cleaved type of lymphomas, also known as Burkitt's lymphoma, where the cell of origin is the B cell, and the most common site is in the abdomen or in the head and neck region. And the translocation observed here is of translocation 814. Lymphoblastic lymphomas or diffuse large cell lymphomas, they account for around one third of the patient, with the most common site of involvement is over either in the mediastinum or in the head and neck region. Anaplastic type of large cell lymphoma, here the cell of origin is mostly the T cell type, and the site here is specifically the skin or lymph node or the soft tissue. Clinical presentation depends upon the location of onset, pathological subtype, as well as the primary or secondary site of involvement. Typically, children presents with an extranodal disease involving either mediastinum or the gastrointestinal tract, where the children might observe or might present to you with the intersusception or GI bleeds or a lymph node mass, and may be confused with the common conditions like abdominal cocks or something. Then the children might have a primary onset in the head and neck region also. 70% of the children, they usually come to you when the stage has been advanced to either stage 3 or 4, where the marrow or CNS is also getting involved, because this is the condition which has a very high proliferation index. Systemic symptoms are also not very commonly seen, as we have observed in Hodgkin's disease also. Then clinical presentation, if there is a a medicinal involvement, the child might comes to you with frank Spivak syndrome with distended neck veins, edema of the face, breathlessness, headache, and altered mental status. Then, if there is a GI involvement, primary site of involvement is the ileocecal lesion or in the appendix or colon. The children here can come to you with abdominal pain, vomiting, distension with palpable mass, interception, ascites, or hepatosplenomegaly. Primary head and neck involvement seen in around 30% of the children with enlargement of the cervical lymph nodes or of the parotid glands or the jaw area, where it is the most common presentation in the endemic type of Burkitt's lymphoma. The children, they can also come to you with nasal stuffiness or earache with hearing loss, with um, tonsillar enlargement and the involvement of Valder ring also. Then epidural or CNS involvement, which is more common in Burkitt's type of lymphoma, they can come to you with acute paraplegia or compression of the nerve roots, leading to um, symptoms. Then tumor lysis is also a well-known complication which is present once as an initial presentation in children with non-Hodgkin's type of lymphoma. Then coming on to the staging for non-Hodgkin's type of lymphomas are almost same as we have seen in Hodgkin's type. Here in stage 1, there is a either single tumor which could be extranodal or a single anatomical area nodal tumor with exclusion of mediastinum and abdomen. In stage 2 disease, either there is a single extranodal involvement with the regional lymph node or two or more nodal areas on the same side of diaphragm. Two single tumors with or without regional lymph node involvement on same side of diaphragm, or a resectable primary GI tumor, usually in the ileocecal region, with or without involvement of associated mesenteric lymph nodes only. In stage 3 disease, two single tumors above and below the diaphragm, two or more nodal areas both sides of diaphragm, then all primary intrathoracic diseases, all extensive primary intra-abdominal disease, and paraspinal or epidural teeth diseases are categorized under stage 3. Patients with distant metastasis to CNS and bone marrow, they are categorized as stage 4 disease. So this is all we have seen as a symptoms. And coming on to the evaluation, once we have seen that the child might have abnormal lymph node masses at various anatomical reasons, we have to go for further history and physical examination to look for any other infectious complications or any predisposing factor which can be identified. Then complete CBC with the metabolic profile, staging of the disease involving CT chest, neck and abdomen, or we may have to go for a PET CT at the upfront. Then adequate surgical biopsy to look for cytological, immunological and cytogenic abnormalities. This is very important nowadays for the risk stratification of this condition. Then bilateral bone marrow aspiration as well as biopsy is very important to look for the marrow involvement. CSF if we suspect that there is a neurological involvement, and staging nephrotomy also losing its significance for staging. Then once we have diagnosed, the most first and foremost thing is to look for any life-threatening complications associated with these conditions. So the two most common complications which are observed in the children is tumor lysis syndrome and a superior vena cava syndrome, depending upon the location of these children. So severe vena cava syndrome either can be present to you with airway obstruction or the esophageal compression. So here management involves propping up the patient with use of fluids which should be given in the lower limbs preferably, and we may have to go for a stress dose of chemotherapy also, which involves either a single dose of steroids or a small dose of cyclophosphamide or a localized well low dose radiotherapy just to prevent the life-threatening complications. Reassessment is done 4 to 6 hourly, and if there is no improvement, surgical biopsy has to be taken. And even if this is not possible, so patient might be a candidate to start an empirical chemotherapy and just go for the definitive diagnosis at a later stage. Another important complication which is seen in the children is the tumor necrosis syndrome, which is a metabolic syndrome resulting from the rapid lysis of these cells within the peripheral blood, causing the various metabolic abnormalities like hypercalcemia, hyperkalemia, hyperuricemia, hypocalcemia, and acute renal failure and renal insufficiency. So here the management depends on good supportive care, including very good hydration to maintain a renal flow of around 100 ml per meter square per day. Then allopurinol, which is an xanthine oxidase inhibitor, is also given as an therapeutic option, which involves uses of allopurinol 300 milligram per meter square per day, along with alkalinization of the urine using soda bicarb, treatment of hyperkalemia depending upon the ECG changes. And if all these biochemical changes they will not improve over a period of next 12 to 24 hours, the patient becomes a candidate for hemodialysis. And once the child is hemodynamically stable, definitive chemotherapy is the only treatment option which is available. Other complications like pericardial effusion and tamponade, small bowel obstruction, GI bleeds, acute paraplegia, raised ICT, all these complications are managed according to the treatment. And a multi-agent chemotherapy is the specific treatment or treatment of choice for these children. Multi-agent short duration intensive chemotherapy is the only option which is available. And CNS prophylaxis is the crucial part of the therapy. High dose of methotrexate or another intrathecal agents like methotrexate or Ara-C just to prevent the CNS relapse. So there are various protocols which can be used. Commonly used one are the BFM NHL 90 protocols or BFM 95 protocols nowadays. Patients with having advanced disease or patients having large B cell type of lymphoma, they can be used for having a COP or COPEDM protocols. So these various protocols can be utilized with a very good response in patients with Burkitt's type of lymphoma, which is a B cell type of lymphoma, but patients who are having large B cell type of lymphoma or anaplastic tumors, they will not survive even after an intensive chemotherapy, and these are the candidates for the um, future or trial chemotherapies also. And prognosis, as we have told you, predominantly depend on the pathological type and tumor burden at the time of diagnosis, presence or absence of CNS disease, specific metastasis if available or not. Then we need to look for the long-term complications of radiation and chemotherapy also, which is common. So I think we should stop short over here. So this is the basics which we should all know regarding the acute malignancies in children. So I think we should stop short over here, and next we will discuss in the next lecture. So all of you should write your attendance in the message box. Thanks. Excuse me, भैया